In this video, I'm going to go over the individual homework, strings, lists, and whiles. And in this homework, we are writing two functions, average, negative, evens, and count letter. And so what I've done is I've created a Python file with some comments in it. I started with some general comments at the top, a summary of what this program is doing, and my name, the author. And then I've copied the example information into comments to help guide me as I work through this problem. And what I also have up for reference is the guidelines that I recommend you use for implementing functions. And in fact, what I'm going to do is start with this checklist. So the first step is to understand what to implement. And so that's why I've put comments with examples right in my file so those are easy to reference while I'm coding. And ideally, I should implement the code and then I can create the function from that and make variables for the different repeated values. Okay, so what I'm going to start off with is I'm going to start with just the def line and a call so that I have something I can run and work with quickly. So I'm going to say def average, negative, evens, and it says in the assignment that I'm taking a list of numbers as a parameter. So I think a good meaningful name might be list. And I can see from the example that I am taking a list of integers, both positive and negative. Okay, so that's going to be my stand-in. And I'm going to do something here. The other thing I can see right away is that it's returning something. It's going to return. So I can just fill in what's called a function stub. And I can fill in a default value. Even though that's not going to be accurate, it's a visual reminder for myself that I should be returning something here. If I wanted to, I could even go so far as to return an average or something like that. But Python doesn't like it, so I'll just leave myself a comment there that I want to return an average. And so this is the process that you can follow to systematically make sure and get to check yourself that you're not missing any steps of the function. Now I want to call it. The first thing I do is I want to be able to run my program so that I can test it. Now best practice is to call my functions from below. And in fact, it's to have a main function that calls it. But one thing I often forget to do is to call main. So I'm going to do that right away so that I don't forget. Okay, so I'm going to call average, neg, evens. And I already have a list right here. In fact, I can copy and paste this whole line right here. And what I'm looking for is that this should be -3. Okay. And in fact, if I wanted, I could set this equal to -3. That would be one other way of doing it. But right now, I'm going to run this and just visually inspect it. Okay, and I can see that it is outputting print, not -3. So now I want to dive in and try to work through this function. Okay, so let's work backwards a little bit. So an average is a sum divided by a count. Okay, so I want to sum the negative evens and divide by the count of the number of negative evens. That's the basics of how we calculate an average. But some of my numbers in my list might not be negative and they might not be even. So I can't just say sum the list and divide by the length. I actually need to write a loop to go through this. And as part of my loop, I'm going to need what's called aggregator, excuse me, they might be aggravating, but these are aggregator variables to calculate the average. So I'm going to create a sum variable and a count variable. Now you might notice that I've initialized both of these variables to be 0. That's because when I'm summing and counting, I'm going to be adding inside my loop. And so 0 is a nice neutral value to initialize my variables to, so it won't change the resulting sum. If I was, for example, multiplying numbers together, then a good neutral initial value might be 1 instead of 0. I also want to go through for each number in my list. Okay, so I've got the basics here. Now what? Now I want to look for negative evens. And I can do this using one if you recall from if conditions, that unit we talked about, we can actually combine conditions using and, or, and not. And so I'm going to use that technique here. So if the number is, we want it to be negative. So if it's less than 0, and we want it to be even. And the way I determine that is if the number is divisible by 2. That means if modulus 2 gives me no remainder. And notice how I go about using this and. I have to have a full thought, a full condition, num less than 0, num mod 2. I can't just say if num less than 0 and mod 2 equals 0. I have to tell the computer each time what value I'm comparing, what I'm working with. So if it's negative and it's even, then I want to add the number to my sum, and I want to increase my count, right? I'm saying that I've seen a negative even number, and then I'm summing it up. Then down below, I can now calculate my average in this way, okay? So let's give this a shot. Let's see if we get the right answer. All right, and we do. So I'm going to, normally I would want to test that with an additional example, but in the interest of time, I'm going to continue on. And we're going to work on the next one called count letter. And so I'm going to do the same process that I followed before. I'm going to start off with just the function signature. That helps me. If you're not ready for that yet, please don't hesitate to write the code for the body and then add the function in, the def line, if you find that's helpful for substituting in the parameters. I find it, at this stage of my programming career, I find it simple to work with parameters, but if that's not where you are, no worries. A great tool you can use is to implement it and then use the concrete values in your implementation to help figure out where the parameters belong. And that's the process that this worksheet follows to the letter. Def count letter, list letter. And so you can see I'm pulling my variable names actually right from my example that I'm trying to do here. Okay, and this should return a count. So again, returns the number of times the letter occurs, both upper and lowercase. So we want to make sure we're doing that. So I'm going to comment that in there. Okay, both upper and lower. So this is number of times letter occurs, both upper and lowercase. There we go. We can get it to fit in. All right. Good. And now in my main, I want to take advantage of this example I have here. I can tab it over. So this is where I'm testing everything. And then this should output 6 if I've implemented things correctly. So let's give this a shot. All right, so I need the number of times the letter occurs, both upper and lowercase. So in this case, I'm just counting. I'm counting occurrences. I don't need a sum of numbers like I did for average. I only need the count. So I'm going to go ahead and create an aggregator variable for count. Okay. And then I'm going to write a loop that goes through each string and then counts the occurrences of these O's. And there's really two ways of doing this. So for string in list. So I'm going to use my variable names to help remind me what these variables are storing, what types of values. So for each string in the list, now there's two ways we can go about this. One is to use the string count function, which I'm going to demonstrate here. Another way is to create an additional loop that goes through every letter in the string and adds them. So that's also an option. So I'm going to say string dot count. Then I believe I need to do letter. Now this isn't going to work quite right off the bat, but we'll work through it and see what we need to improve. And I also need to add that. I can't just count the string, I need to add it to my variable so it keeps it. And then here, instead of returning 0, I'll try and return count. So we're going to start here, and then let's see what number we get. Okay, we get 4. So let's look at our list and figure out why it might be 4. Well, I can see we're searching for lowercase o, and here we have 2 O's, and here we have 2 O's for a total of 4. We're missing our uppercase O's. So we do need to work with our case, upper and lower case. So the easiest thing I can do is do string dot lower dot count. Let's try that. Let's see what happens. And I get 6. However, what if my user instead typed in an uppercase O? What's going to happen there? I got nothing. So we need to do one more step. And so what we can do is we could say letter.lower right here, but that's not super efficient. Remember we talk about dryness. I'll put it right here. For every string in our list, we're going to be lowercasing the letter. But really, I could be lowercasing the letter right up here. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it once before the loop so that I don't have to waste time in my loop lowercasing it every time. It doesn't really make sense to do this string separately because I have to loop through every string in the list. So that does make sense to do inside the loop. But the letter, I can save my program some time, some CPU cycles, by converting this letter once before the loop instead of inside. Let's see. And now we also get 6. And there you have it.